Hi guys, welcome to our channel, and this is the second Ccna Lab session, and we will be configuring the SSH configuration on the Cisco router. And let's move on. What is SSH? So let's check why we need SSH, because we have already telnet, but there are, due to security reasons, the telnet is very transparent and the passwords can be exposed if someone captures on the network. That's why we need to use encryptions when getting logging into the router, and so the password can be secured and even the data can be secured if encryption is used. So so SSH was designed as a replacement for the telnet and an unsecured remote shell protocols. There are a lot of other things like RSH, and also you call RLogin and REXE protocols. These are the unsecured, and because it will expose the password into the network, the username and the password, and also the data is not encrypted. So SSH provides a secure channel over an unsecured network by using a client-server architecture, connecting an SSH client application with an SSH server. So what we will have in SSH is basically you will have SSH client and SSH server, and the client will connect to the server. And there are two major versions of this. One is SSH1, the initial version, and then you have SSH2. And the port used for this SSH is 22 TCP port. And I hope you know that for telnet the TCP port used is 23. So this is the basics about SSH, secure shell, and it is the one currently used everywhere in the network for the remote connections, because of it is secured. But telnet still used if you are not very concerned on the security, or if this network is internal, and you can use telnet still. But all the whole networks nowadays, they use SSH because it's a secured protocol. Okay, now we will move on to the lab session. So for this lab session, we have the same setup as used in the lab session 1, and we have one PC and one router, and it is set up with the initial IP addresses. If you want to know what is the IP address set on the router PC, you can type if config command, which will show you the IP address setup, which is 192.168.0.2, and on the router it is show IP interface brief. So it will show you what is the IP setup. So this is the initial setup. Now we will just do some testing before we proceed in configuration. So the telnet setup is allowed on this router. We can verify that. Show running configuration, and you look for the session, only that configuration session related to VTY, that is line session, line, you can say line VTY, so that you get only what is configured. So line VTY is already configured, and there is a password is set up, and so we should be able to telnet. While telnetting, we will do a capture on the network and see that we are able to see the password used. That is basically it should be test1. Okay, let's start the capture on this start Wireshark capture. So you can see that there is a packet capture is running now, and so let me start the telnet session with the router from here. That is from the PC. You are just going to do telnet to 192.168.0.1, which is the router address. So when you do a telnet, it's it's allowing the telnet is enabled there. So what you do now, it's asking for the password. Password is test1. So you are inside the router now. You are able to log in. So let's see in the capture, are you able to see the password? Okay. This basically, let us see here in the telnet what is the. Okay, it should be at the end, right? Because we have. So this is the data actually. We will see here one by one. This is logged in already, so that is why you see the data is R1. And then we will see here the data return command. Okay, and I will just go still above. This is still further up. Telnet data. It starts from telnet data. We can see here telnet data. What is the first data? This is the first letter of the password T, and you see the next letter E. So you see the next letter S, and you see the next letter test T, and then you see the next letter 1. So when you do a capture on the network interface, if you have the access, you can able to know what is the password used on the telnet session, so you are able to log in. So security, there's no security in that. So and also you see the port number used for the is 23, that is the telnet. Just wanted to make sure you know this part, because there could be some questions on this port number used by the telnet and also SSH. SSH is 22 always. So we now verified the telnet. Now we will move on to the configuration of SSH, and we will verify the SSH from the PC to the router. Okay, I just wanted to test one more thing before configuration, that is we can also configure username and password and try to log in using telnet. Config T and username is Cisco and password I will put it as test2. Now we will try to log in from the PC. It's the same telnet session, telnet to the router, and since under the VTUI we have not set up as login as a local, that's why still it's using the only the password is required. So the password it will take is test1. Okay, it will log in. But now I wanted to make it to work with the username and password setup. So what we need to do is we have to go to the line VTY 04 and you put login local. So this will enable to use the password setup, username and password setup. Yeah, login is local, not what is set up in the under the VTY password. So now let's try to log in from the PC. Test01. See, it's asking the username now. We have to put Cisco and use password is set up as test2. So we are able to log into the router. So we will try now. There is no SSH configured on the router now. So we will try to see whether we are able to do SSH. SSH from the PC is normally done like the command should be like username, that is SSH is the client and then username at the IP address of the router basically. Okay, now we will just try 192.168 is the IP address. If you know the host name also we can try, but you have to have a host name resolution. So 192.168 we are trying to log in as a SSH user Cisco. Okay, enter. It says that connection refused. That means there is no SSH is configured on the router. So let's start the configuration of SSH on the router. So what is the procedures to configure? So let's do step by step. Let me show you in the slides the configuration method, and then you can do it in the lab. So basically the steps involved in SSH configuration in router is you have to set up the host name and the domain name. The CLI commands for that is in the config mode is global config mode. You have to set up host name, then you put whatever the name you want host name to be, and also the domain name, whichever the domain you want to set up. You have to, this is on the global config, and username password we already created for telnet, we can use that one. And there is important thing is called we need to create the RSA key, that is crypto key generate RSA. This command will configure the RSA keys, and then what is the bits encryption is 1024 bits basically, and then we are now with this SSH configuration is done. Let's go and do it on the router now. So what are the things you need to, so host name first, right? We are in the global config mode, right? Yes, config R1 in config, that means global mode configuration. So we need to set host name. We can set whatever the host name you want. Host name I will just set whatever I set it in the presentation, that is 01. I set the host name, so host name is changed to PER, RTR router, the place name and router and whatever the number you want to give. It's just a convention, that's all. Okay, now we have to set the domain name. That's two things are very important. There will be a question, what is required to configure to enable the SSH on the router. That is, you have to enable SSH, you need to set up the domain name and also the host name should be there. So domain name, domain IP domain name, right? IP DOMAIN domain dash name. Then you put whatever the name you want to do. I will just put this network.in. Okay, so it is done. Domain name is set up. And now the next step is to generate the RSA key, that is crypto key, CRYPTO key, generate RSA. And then you put the how many bits module, the 1024 bits. So RSA key is generated. Once RSA key is generated, now we have done with the SSH config. Now we will try to connect from the PC to the router SSH. What happens? So username, I'm going to use the same thing what we have created on the local, that is Cisco, and then so the thing is it possible someone is doing something and its verification has failed? Okay, so there is some configuration issues which I need to check it out on the PC, because I used the same thing to log in before, so there is something stored in the SSH known host. So I will remove those things. So cd to /root .ssh. Anything exists in the known host, I will delete it. Yeah, cat known host. I'm just opening the file, what is there to check. Already the entry is there and it was used in the previous testing. So I will remove this vi to known host. Yes, I need to empty it, that's all. So I use delete, so no lines. So now we can try again to log into the this one, right? So this happens when you're already logged in and using the same for testing purpose. So Cisco. Okay, so first time it's login, so it is trying to copy the public. So yes, you say. So it is added. Now it's asking for the password. Password is for the user is, we set it up as test1, right? Or test2. Test2. So good. So now we have logged into the router using from the PC using SSH. Now we can say what is the, if you want to verify show users, it will say what is the. So we can see that through VTY port, and it has been connected through router in this session. Cisco username is Cisco. Okay, so we are successfully able to set up the SSH on the router and log in through SSH. So default it is allowing both the SSH, and if you want to restrict or you want to limit, we don't want to allow telnet. See, right now we can do a telnet and SSH, I think. Yeah, we'll just check it out now. Try telnet also. Telnet is still valid. Telnet Cisco test. Cisco test2. Yeah, still telnet is working, but you don't want to allow telnet from the PC to that through a VTY terminal. So what you can do is, there is a configuration in the VTY, under VTY, which we can set up only to allow SSH. So for that, you go into the line VTY 04, whatever you call it, and then you say that transport TRAN, yes, tab you can use after that. Transport input only SSH. Okay, what will happen now we will see. Since you restricted on the VTY only to SSH, so let's try telnet. It should not be allowed. That's what we need to, yeah. So unable to connect. Connection is refused because you restricted to only SSH. Let's try SSH. Yeah, so SSH is allowing and the password is test2. So with this lab, you have learned about how to set up SSH and also an additional things like how to restrict through terminal session only SSH, but not the telnet. So because you don't want security to be to secure the network basically. Thank you for watching, and I'm sure this may help you to answer few questions in the CCNA exam. And if you think the video was useful, thumbs up and subscribe.